Welcome everyone to Intimate Partner Violence and Stalking Awareness panel discussion. The moderators will be myself, Victoria Pilates, Center for the Women of New York President, and Cecilia Venosta Weigel, Center for the Women of New York Vice President. Thank you, Cecilia.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending our webinar tonight. Before we start, we would like to share with you the services that the center is offering right now. We're offering caregivers phone support group, conversational English as second language classes. We do have a legal support team that answers via email to any inquiries you have. We do have referral services. So call us if you're not sure if we offer that. If we don't have that service, we will refer you to the right place. We do offer webinars on women's issues such as this one, Women in Crisis Individual Counseling. We also have Women in Crisis support groups. And our upcoming events are a book club. We're actually looking for someone to run that. So if you're interested, please contact us. We'll be happy to have you volunteer. We'll have a career workshop in March, computer classes, green team. We're trying to put together an Earth Day event, and we would love you to participate on that if you're interested in the environment. We have financial literacy series going on now on the third Wednesday of every month. We will have women artists exhibits and a walking group. Tomorrow we do have a workshop about our financial literacy series. It's part of that series, a workshop that, and it is about taxes. We know it's tax season, so if you need help with that, join us.
And if you would like for the Center for the Women of New York to continue to provide these educational programs, you can donate at CWNY.org, donations, become a member, or volunteer with us. So we'd like to know who you are. If any of you is a service provider, could you please, there will be a poll question popping up soon. Could you please answer yes? If you are not a provider, if you are just here to learn about these topics, please answer no.
We have most people who responded, 80%. Just give a couple more seconds and then I'll stop it. Well, thank you for answering.
Thank you.
So all the attendees, Victoria, I don't know if you can see it, but are not service providers.
Interesting. Thank you for answering. Second question. Do you know the difference between intimate partner violence and domestic violence? Please answer yes or no.
We have about 66% of people responded. And if you haven't, I'll give it a few more seconds. The question is, do you know the difference between intimate partner violence and domestic violence? So Victoria, we're at 50 and 50.
Okay. Thank you. Next screen. According to Ron Wallace, PhD, Associate Professor of Criminal Justice at American Military University, domestic violence historically meant violence in an opposite-sex heterosexual marriage. Typically, the abuser was the husband and the wife was the victim. The concept of intimate partner violence acknowledges that abuse can exist in any type of personal, intimate relationship, regardless of sexual orientation, marital status, or gender. Poll question 3. Can you define stalking? Yes or no?
Victor, or 80% does know, can define stalking, and 20% cannot.
Okay, let's see if you're correct. Stalking is conservatively defined as a course of conduct directed at a specific person that involves repeated 2 or more occasions, visual or physical proximity, non-consensual communication, or verbal, written, or implied threats, or a combination thereof that would cause a reasonable person fear. And this is from a study conducted by Patricia Jaden and Nancy Theonis for the federal government. Stalking behaviors include knowing the victim's schedule, showing up at places the victim goes, sending mail and pictures. Again, this is always repetitive and non-consensual. Calling or texting repeatedly, contacting the victim or posting about the victim on social networking sites, writing letters, damaging the victim's property, creating a website about the victim, and sending gifts repeatedly. It doesn't sound like stalking, but that certainly is. When you don't want all this attention and you're wondering where it's coming from, it could be very unnerving. And also, stalking abusers steal victims' belongings. According to the National Center for Victims of Crime, stalking is a crime and can be dangerous. The legal definition of stalking and possible punishment for it are different in every state. Contact a victim advocate or your local police to learn about stalking laws and your rights in your state. Now, in particular, Center for the Women of New York, we'd like to share the New York State penal law. Stalker need not intend fear. Rather, a reasonable person should expect this behavior to make someone fearful. Victim need not actually experience fear. Rather, would a reasonable person have been made fearful based on history and context? There are 4 counts of stalking under New York State penal law of varying degrees of severity depending on the stalker's behavior.
Thank you, Victoria. I would love to get the audience engaged, and your questions will be addressed after all the panelists have presented. Feel free to use the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask any questions you have for the panelists. If you did dial in, email your questions to events@cwny.org. Our panelists tonight are Alpana Patel. She's a program coordinator and clinician at Mount Sinai Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention, SAVI. Keith Scott, he is the director of education at the Safe Center, and Sergeant Joseph Alohan. He is in the NYPD in the domestic violence unit. I would like to introduce Alpana Patel. She's a program coordinator and clinician as for the Mount Sinai Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention, as I said, based at Elmhurst Hospital, where she provides services for survivors of sexual assault, child sexual abuse, human trafficking, and intimate partner violence. Alpana has an MSW from Columbia University and an MA in Sustainable International Development from Brandeis University. She has also completed postgraduate training in integrative trauma studies at the National Institute of Psychotherapy. She has substantial experience working on issues of gender-based violence in the United States and abroad. She has been working in the anti-violence field for more than 15 years and is fluent in South Asian languages of Hindi, Urdu, and Gujarati, and I'm sure I mispronounced it, and I apologize for that. All right. Welcome, Alpana. I will now stop sharing my screen so you can take it away. Thank you for being with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Good evening. And welcome to this very important conversation on intimate partner violence and stalking. So a little bit about the Mount Sinai SAVI program. SAVI is a nonprofit organization within the Mount Sinai health system. We are grant funded and we provide free trauma-informed therapy to survivors of sexual violence, domestic violence, and sex trafficking. We also have emergency department advocacy, where we have trained volunteer advocates that respond to 8 emergency rooms between different hospitals in Manhattan and Queens when there are cases of intimate partner violence and sexual abuse, sexual assault that when survivors come to the emergency room for any kind of medical care related to the trauma that they went through. And we also have an outreach, training, and education department. And since we are grant funded, again, all our services are free and confidential. So in terms, I also just wanted to mention in terms of the emergency room, emergency department, I'm based at Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, which is one of the hospitals where we do have, where volunteer advocates do come. Right now, of course, everything is virtual because of the pandemic. And Elmhurst Hospital is our busiest hospital of all the hospitals that advocates respond to. We have some specific programs at SAVI. One is called the Takano program, which is for Orthodox Jewish survivors of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, as well as we have a specific program where we serve survivors of commercial sexual exploitation. We have clinicians that speak many languages, between 11 of us, including Spanish, French, Polish. I speak Hindi, Gujarati, Urdu, and probably a handful of others that are slipping my mind right now. And our services are based in Manhattan and Queens, and we will hopefully be expanding into Brooklyn as well. And we're a resource here for you and your community. So what is intimate partner violence? Intimate partner violence is a pattern of abusive behavior that is used to exert power and control over a current or former romantic or sexual partner. And I know a question was asked earlier. Victoria asked a question: what is the difference between domestic violence and intimate partner violence? Domestic violence is violence that happens between two people who know each other, and they could be related by blood or marriage. So it could be between parent and child, between like an adult parent, adult child and parent, can be between siblings, or people that live together. Whereas intimate partner violence is specifically for people who are involved in in a relationship or may have a child in common. So, so that is something that distinguishes intimate partner violence from domestic violence, that there is, just because of, due to the nature of the relationship, there is that level of intimacy in the past or present. So that's the difference between when we say domestic violence versus intimate partner violence, very broadly speaking. I am not, I'm assuming some of you may have come across this image of something that encapsulates in very broad terms what domestic violence, intimate partner violence is. and it's called the power and control wheel. And so you can see at the center is power and control, because that's at the core of intimate partner violence. And there are things that happen around it, as you can see, where there are ways that are used to exert that power and control. It could be, physical violence, verbal abuse, mental abuse, financial abuse, and sexual violence as well. And these are different ways that the abuser exerts power and control over the survivor. And something that I often, when I'm doing psychoeducation as well as trainings, is I try to emphasize that this form of way of interacting with a person is very particular, that a abuser chooses to do towards the survivor, because this is not how typically or generally speaking somebody who exerts his power and control over their current or former partner do in their sibling relationships or their work relationships or their friendships. It's a very particular way of treating their partner. So that's an important distinction. And not everybody who is experiencing intimate partner violence may have this part of their experience, but this is, again, just very broadly speaking, and just synthesizes some ways in which these dynamics play out. So some of the common ways, physical violence is the most commonly associated with intimate partner violence. When you think of that, we think of somebody physically hurting their partner. However, it takes various other forms, including sexual violence, where there could be forced sex. It could be manipulating safe sex practices, in the sense that you may agree to have condoms on for protection. However, you may not go through with it and remove the condom while you're engaging in the act. Also, controlling reproductive health, birth control, what kinds of birth control their partner can use, if they can use any birth control, having children, not having children, forced, coerced terminations of pregnancies. These all can also be part of the dynamic. Non-physical would, what we would say would be the emotional, aspect of it, where a person is made to feel afraid by using threatening loved ones, family members. Like, I will hurt your parent, I will hurt your sibling. Threats to pets is very, very common. And also when we assess for lethality in a relationship and escalation of violence, threatening pets is very closely associated with further physical harm, including using like weapons to actually kill their partner. So there's a strong correlation between that, when they threaten to hurt their pet, or actually do something to hurt the pets that live in that maybe the survivor may have. Forcing unsafe living conditions, being in the car and like threatening them they're going to bump, like drive really fast, and dangerous driving can also is a form of, not hurting them directly in that way, but like non-physical threatening to their personal safety. Financial, allowing the person to work, not, controlling their work hours, even if they're not allowing them to work could be also part of it. And if they're working, controlling their money that they're getting, that is also part of financial abuse. And then there is, let me just move this here. Psychological, whereas there's the intimidation, the manipulation, like, oh, I didn't say that, you're just making it up. If a survivor brings up something that's a very common threat in all intimate partner violence, abusive relationships. There's isolation, cutting them off from their family and friends, so they have nowhere to go, nobody to turn to. Online harassment, that's a really kind of like a relatively newer area of how power and control is exerted. And another one that I also wanted to add is through smart devices. Now, increasingly, homes have alarm systems, smart devices that control heating and cooling in a home. I mean, so many other things like turning off lights on and off and things like that. That's another way in which intimate partner violence is, can also be played out in those dynamics where the user has control over that, access to that, and continues and can harass a survivor even though they may not be living together. And just some statistics, they are absolutely jarring. More than 10 million adults experience IPV in a year. That's 1 every 3 seconds. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men reporting experience domestic violence to the extent that they end up interfacing with some kind of medical or legal mental health or victim service programs. And there is this nexus between abusers' access to firearm and intimate partner homicide. It goes up by 400%. It's very, very drastic increase. And 1 in 2 female murder victims and 1 in 13 male murder victims are killed by intimate partners. So intimate partner violence is deadly as well. And something that I want to point out that we've also seen in our work is an increase in intimate partner violence in America. This research study, says that I got from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence at 42%. And, I just wanted to highlight a couple reasons. Of course, it's always complicated and many things are, the factors that contribute or exacerbate intimate partner violence. But one being, I think in general, there was this, the last presidential election, there was a lot of violent language that was used towards particularly women. And that really, we saw that in terms of like people that just feeling like they are entitled and felt empowered and emboldened to further escalate violence. And the other thing too is that there was this sort of like also happening at the same time, this like backlash where women were survivors, were more coming out more and more more than before, and talking about their abusive experiences, and were publicly naming people that had harmed them. And there was this also sort of like backlash that was happening as well. So I think just broad reasons, but many more that has led to that increase. Within intimate partner violence, there is the dynamic of stalking, which is, similar what Victoria said. It's just this increased repeated obsessive action that a person does, which instills fear for the person's safety. And the emotional distress, the mental distress, anxiety, post-traumatic stress symptoms that a person experiences, they can experience all of those things by somebody who can be stalking them, because it's this the element of not knowing and not having control over your own personal surroundings, your autonomy, is very, very distressing for any person, as I'm sure everybody can understand that. And stalking is also, there's this correlation also in addition to access to firearms, is also there's this correlation with being killed. 1 in 10 women, 1 in 50 men have experienced stalking. So it's not, you know, it's not as uncommon as we may sometimes think that it is. Yeah, and 66% of female stalking victims reported that it was by current or former partners. So for women, there's this particular dynamic of it being by somebody who they are or were or involved with in an intimate dynamic. And sorry, before that was I also just wanted to end by mentioning too that the pandemic has also made domestic violence, has further exacerbated domestic violence, because you know, when people have more like time that people are spending together, it just further increases the opportunities. That's one reason why there's been an increase. People are at home together. That just increases the instances of where the further violence occurs. And there are also the obvious stressors that exacerbate violence in a relationship, such as job losses, financial insecurity, food insecurity, housing insecurity. All these factors also exacerbate violence. So we've seen an increase as well in our emergency room departments, as well as requests for services for domestic violence. And the other challenge has been providing services in a safe for survivors to find safe spaces to engage in services. Because of the pandemic, we're providing services remotely, and when somebody comes to our office for services, obviously they have that safe space and that confidentiality. But when at home, they've just had a very, very hard time finding. We live in New York City. Most of us live in apartments and small spaces, and we could be living with multiple people. Sometimes there's like one family living in a room together type of situation. So it's been very we've also had to get very creative and work around these very, very real challenges of providing services to our survivors. So fingers crossed, hoping that that light at the end of the tunnel, we are able to reach it, and we're able to resume life, where we can, before we went into all this virtual mode, and we can, be able to provide services to survivors in person that really need it, and where virtual is not an option for them. And here's some resources. That's the number for the SAVI program. The New York Family Justice Centers are an amazing resource. Every borough has one. You can call 311 to get the phone number to the one in your borough, or visit the New York City website for the Office Against Gender-Based Violence. Safe Horizon, who also operates the city's 24-hour domestic violence hotline, as well as the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the state coalition, as well as the New York State Office of Victim Services. Office of Victim Services is is a place that we can go to file, to get lots of different information, resources, and support. But also one of the important functions that they have is you can file a claim for survivors of domestic violence if you have filed a police report, and for survivors of sexual violence if you report it to a hospital, and even if you don't report to law enforcement necessarily at that time, you can file a claim with them, where you will get reimbursed for any out-of-pocket expenses related to the crime that you have experienced. And it's for a lifetime, so you can continue to get the help that you need for as long as that service is related to the crime that you experienced. That's it.
Thank you so much,
You're
Alpana.
welcome.
We appreciate what you do for victims of intimate partner violence. We appreciate your presentation too, and sharing your knowledge with our members.
Thank you. Let me.
You can just click on stop share.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Thank you. And again, we will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. So now I would like to introduce Keith Scott. He is the Director of Education for the SAFE Center in Long Island, a victim services agency dedicated to protecting, assisting, and empowering victims of family violence and sexual assault. Keith's role is to lead the education department in challenging and changing social norms that perpetrate abuse. He has been featured in local and regional media outlets, speaking on the topics of domestic violence, trauma, sexual assault, and addiction. Keith is also an adjunct professor at Hofstra University and holds the title of Master Trainer in the Child Abuse Prevention Curriculum. Enough abuse and is a certified survivor advocate for survivors of sexual assault. Keith earned his master's degree in public policy from Stony Brook University, a bachelor's in criminal justice from Long Island University, and is a recipient of the 2020 Long Island Business News 30 Under 30 Award. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. So thank you again for putting this panel together and inviting the SAFE Center to speak. And thank you everyone who came out, from your busy schedules to attend a workshop on domestic violence. We need more people like you to stand up and speak out against this issue. The only real way to eradicate this issue is bring it to light and talk about it. And, it's not a taboo subject. It should not be stigmatized. I'm sure we all know someone, if not ourselves, have experienced or witnessed domestic violence. So it's really important that as the New York State community, we all stand up and speak out against domestic violence. So tonight, I'm going to speak to you about the SAFE Center, our services, our response during the coronavirus pandemic, how the pandemic has impacted victims of abuse, as well as ways to assist and step in. And then I'm happy to take your questions at the end. So I'm just going to share my screen. And once again, please, no questions are off limit. We're all here to educate and provide, some type of knowledge. So the impacts of COVID-19 on victims of abuse. So if you want to learn more about the SAFE Center or our programs, feel free to follow us on social media. So I'm the Director of Education for the Education Department and SAFE Center. We have at least 2 workshops a week that are free for the community that talk about an array of topics. For example, on Thursday, all morning, like about 9 to 1 o'clock, we're having a human trafficking workshop. Anyone could attend. We had a speaker of human trafficking, survivor of human trafficking speak last week. We have many things going on to make sure we're educating the community. If you want to learn more, they are all free to attend if you're just attending to learn. So feel free to follow us on social media and learn more. So really quickly, what is the SAFE Center? So the SAFE Center is the primary agency in Nassau County serving all victims of abuse, whether that abuse comes from domestic violence, interpersonal violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, elder abuse, child abuse. We are, for lack of a better term, a one-stop shop for victim services, right? We have all services under one roof. That's what makes us very unique. We are a 30,000 square foot nonprofit that provide all those services I just mentioned. So for victims of domestic abuse, we provide counseling, of course. We have the 24/7 hotline for Nassau County. We have the only domestic violence safe home in Nassau County. So for those that are familiar with New York, probably most of us, we know that Nassau County is one county east of Queens. We are pretty populated. We have 1.3 million people in a relatively small geographic location. For those 1.3 million people, Nassau County only has one domestic violence shelter, believe it or not. We have 17 beds for domestic violence victims for 1.3 million people. So the SAFE Center oversees that domestic violence shelter. We have the lowest number of beds per capita in the state, and we do not have less domestic violence incidents than anywhere else in the state. So our counterpart, Suffolk County, to our east end, has 55 domestic violence beds for victims of abuse for a similar size in population. So we have some work to do in Nassau County, which we're really trying to do that. But so we have, once again, counseling, 24/7 hotline. We have the housing, domestic violence housing. We have a housing program that if someone is in our shelter for example, 90 days and their abuser controlled every amount of their finances, their abuser never let them go to school, never let them work, and they're fleeing their abuser and now they're in the shelter, they get out of the shelter, they have no money, what are they gonna do? We provide a housing stipend or help with the stipend and help them find a place to live and to rent while they get back on their feet. We provide vocational education services and many other services to victims of abuse to make sure they're empowered and able to stand on their own. So that's the safe home and transitional housing you see there. We are in a variety of different courthouses. Prior to the pandemic, our staff were somewhere situated in the courthouse, walking victims through how to apply for a protective order, how to find services, how to going in front of the judge, maybe representing them there. We have many different services there, and then we have yoga and massage for our clients. Once again, prior to the pandemic, of course, we're not providing services that are touching clients right now. We also have a legal team, which I want to mention too. So we have about 7 full-time attorneys at the Safe Center. And other thing I should have mentioned too is that all of our services are 100% free of charge, meaning we don't take insurance. I mean, free, I mean absolutely free. We don't take $1 from clients ever, ever, ever. Everything is free of charge, whether it's counseling, whether it's advocacy services, whether it's legal services. If someone qualifies, we do not charge for those. So we have, once again, a team of full-time attorneys and then about 100 pro bono attorneys that work with us to represent victims of abuse in court for free, whether they're trying to gain custody of their children, trying to get a divorce, having problems with their immigration status. If their abusers holding their immigration status over their head, we help them file a VAWA application or try and get a U visa, which is a pathway to citizenship if someone is a victim of a crime and they're undocumented here in the United States. So once again, we only have 15 minutes to talk about these things. So I want to keep it relatively brief about services. But just want to point out too, so if you do call that hotline, which is 516-542-0404, and you do come in for services, there is a waiting list right now for the legal team, considering, I'm sure you can imagine that our attorneys are free of charge and we're doing many, many things, but we are there for victims of abuse and we are taking clients that need domestic violence counseling, of course. We also have emergency room advocates anytime there's a sexual assault in Nassau County. So unfortunately, there will be one tonight. There's always a sexual assault, right? It's a very prevalent issue. So unfortunately, it's going to happen tonight. So if someone is assaulted tonight and they wind up in the hospital, our volunteer staff wind up there for free and sit with the victim through the process of the forensic examination, other things to help them. If someone winds up in the hospital and they're a victim of interpersonal violence, our staff are there as well with that victim the entire time in the hospital. So we have great partnerships with the Nassau County Police, Nassau County District Attorney's Office, as well as our hospitals, medical professionals, that they know who the Safe Center is and they know we are there for victims of abuse from essentially start until they're no longer in need of the Safe Center services. Once again, all services are free and confidential. So now to the actual part of the presentation. The unfortunate reality is that 55% of female murder victims are killed by intimate partners. And speaking to this, me and my colleagues on here were speaking about this before going live, and we were talking about how communities of color are disproportionately impacted. So the unfortunate stat is that women of color are 3 times more likely to die at the hands of their intimate partner than white women. So it's really important that we're looking at all of our communities and know what's really going on in our communities too. So just wanted to point that out, that this is not just an issue to disregard it. There are people dying every single day because of this issue. It is dangerous when someone leaves their abuser. It's not just, saying to your friend that, oh, you should leave him or you should leave her, or, just end it. But what if just ending it means they're going to wind up dead, right? And this happens to our clients. This really does happen here. So it's really important we take this as seriously as we would take cancer or some other diagnosis, because people are dying every day from this. It is life or death for some. So 81% of women stalked by current or former intimate partner are also physically assaulted by that partner. It's really important that stalking does, 8 out of 10 times, stalking leads to a more severe incident. It's not just someone following someone around. This could be deadly. So some DV stats, right? So just to point out here, I'm not going to read the entire thing. You can see the screen, but so for the first couple of weeks during the pandemic, we saw a 2% increase in domestic violence cases in Nassau County. But just please know that means reported increase, right? We know that people are home with their abusers. We know people are in close contact with their abusers. Maybe they're not allowed to make a phone call. Maybe they're not allowed to leave the house, right? So just because we saw a 2% increase in reports doesn't mean that's the same increase in what really happened. Experts and other people like myself are saying that, we know there's an increase in abuse right now. We know when there's, disastrous things going on in the communities in our environment, that there are increases of abuse. We know during the 2008 financial crisis that for every 1% rise in home foreclosures, there was a corresponding 3 to 8% rise in hospital visits for children with physical abuse, right? So we know that negative events do perpetuate abuse, but I just want to be very, very clear that being annoyed, being scared, being angry does not cause abuse. Abuse is not a anger management problem. It's a power and control issue, right? So just because someone's experiencing job loss or the stress from the pandemic does not make them an abuser, right? If they already have that abusive tendency and we add stress to their plate or other things to their plate, then they can become abusive. But just a negative event in itself will not make someone abusive. So the Safe Center's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So on Monday, March 30th, that should say 2020, right? We're in 2021 now. All non-emergent client services were provided remotely until further notice. We also have the Nassau County Child Advocacy Center on site with us. That's open essentially, 24/7, or if it needs to be, we will be there 24/7. Where anytime there's a case of severe physical or sexual abuse in Nassau County for children, that child is brought to the Safe Center, interviewed by our team of forensic interviewers. So that was open the entire pandemic because children were being abused, right? So we had to make sure we were there to respond to that abuse and then help children in need. But so our non-emergency, that's one of the emergency services. Our shelter, of course, was open the entire time. We had a wonderful partnership with Nassau County where if there was a victim that was positive for COVID-19, they were to be placed in a different place that would be safe for them to stay. So we were prepared for any COVID-19 cases in the domestic violence shelter. All of our services right now, except for the emergency ones, are being provided remotely, whether it's through phone sessions, through Zoom sessions, or other sessions like that. But we are still operating all of our educational seminars. 99.9% of them are being delivered remotely right now through Zoom or other means too. So if you want to learn more about abuse, we're happy to come in and set up a training virtually like we're doing now. And once again, that is our hotline. So what words come to mind with domestic violence? I think many of us, right, we said it before, where I think stereotypical individuals would believe domestic violence is a woman's issue, right? It's an issue of a husband beating a wife. And that's not what we see at the Safe Center at all. The reality is that most of our clients are female, right? But not everyone, right? This isn't everyone's issue. It's all of our community's issue. But so that's one thing we're trying to change, that stigma in the community as well, to make sure people know that, use the correct term, which is intimate partner violence. It's not just husband on wife, right? It could be, girlfriend on boyfriend, boyfriend on girlfriend, boyfriend on boyfriend, vice versa, right? There's many different individuals that fall into this cat umbrella of intimate partner violence. So the reality is 1 in 3 women will experience some form of intimate partner abuse in her lifetime in the US. And 1 in 4 women experience serious physical abuse by a partner. 1 in 3 and 1 in 4, those are astounding numbers, right? That means we all know someone, right? So this is a huge issue faced by our society, and it's not something to overlook, right? We all know someone that has been affected. Whether they're saying it or not, I'm sure we all know someone. This is also a men's issue too. Men are victims as well, and there's even more barriers to men coming forward. I mean, look at the societal response. Prior to the pandemic, when my staff were in schools, I'd go and observe them here and there. And going back to 2019, late 2019, we had a boy, a couple times, a boy in the classroom laughed when we said men could be abused, right? That's still a stigma for us to overcome, still trying to overcome that look. Anyone can be abused. This is not just a woman's issue. Once again, women are more likely to be abused, but men are abused all the time. And many men don't like coming forward for a variety of reasons. That's why it's great that in New York State, we have highly trained police forces like New York State Police that understand the dynamics of domestic violence, that are trained in that and trained in how to respond, and don't just arrest whoever might look like the perpetrator because of how they look or their gender. They look into it more and dive deeper to make sure they're arresting the right perpetrator, considering it's a mandatory arrest in many cases. So once again, 1 in 7 men experience physical abuse by a partner, and 2 in 5 men in same-sex relationships experience domestic violence in the U.S. We also have to look at our, fellow community members in the LGBTQ plus community, they experience domestic violence at a much higher rate than those in heterosexual relationships. So it's important to look at that, look at some barriers faced by the LGBTQ plus community as well, and understand that there are barriers to them coming forwards. We've had cases where, I'll give myself for the example, let's say if I was in a relationship with another man, and that man I was in a relationship with was from a very traditional background where his family would disown him if he came out as a gay man. We had cases where the abuser, in the scenario found the abuser, I would out the individual to their family or threaten to do that if they didn't comply with my demands, right? That's a really scary thing. Some people could be ostracized from their community. Some people could be disowned by their family or killed if they go back to their place of origin, depending on the circumstance, right? So we face these problems all the time. Also to point out some techniques of an experienced batterer, right? Batterers know what they're doing, right? Once again, it's not just an anger management problem. I always give the example that if it was an anger management problem, when that batterer gets pulled over by the police, he would meet the police officer with the same energy and aggression that he's meeting his spouse with, right? And we don't see that, right? If someone can tune it up or tune it down based on what's going on, that's not about anger, that's power and control. You cannot control an anger management problem like that, right? So it's really important to look at those behaviors too. So some techniques of an experienced batterer, what they might do, call 911 first, right? I'll give an example there. I always give me as the example of the abuser. So if I'm engaging in some conflict, some physical conflict, and my spouse gets hurt and whatever happens, I'm like, oh, okay, well, someone's going to the hospital. Let me call 911 first, say I'm the victim. Maybe I'll slam my head into the window or slam my head into the wall or scratch myself or something else. When the police pull up, I'm going to be all calm, cool, and collected because I know what I'm doing and I'm using manipulation and I'm controlling the situation. My spouse, husband, wife, whoever it is, may be hysterical. And who are the police, if they're untrained, who are they going to believe, right? The hysterical person that may look mentally ill, crazy, whatever word you want to use there, or the person that's calm, cool, and collective. Once again, we're lucky to work with NYPD and Nassau County Police Department where they're trained, they understand these dynamics of batterers. Blames the victim for the abuse. If you didn't wear that, I wouldn't be so mad at you. Or if you just got home and if you just told me what you were doing, I wouldn't be so mad. Or if you just helped more, I wouldn't be so mad, right? Putting the blame and ownership on that victim. We see that a lot too. Strikes victim in areas not easily seen. So places you wouldn't see all the time. So the upper thighs, the stomach, the back, places that would not easily be seen by the public, and then pulls it together and police arrive and also intimidates the victim before police get there. If you say anything, if I go to jail, I'm going to take the kids, you're never going to see them again, or I'm going to get out in 4 hours and kill you, or I'm going to get out because maybe the crime I committed does not qualify for bail under the new bail reform guidelines, right? Or even if it does, I'm going to get out in, I don't know, 24 hours, whatever it is, I'm going to come back and kill you, right? Many times victims of abuse don't call the police because they know their abuser's not going to stay away for that long. Maybe they're there for 24 hours. Maybe it's a couple days. Maybe it's a couple days, right? But they're getting out. That's why it's really important at the Safe Center. We work very closely with Nassau County Police, where the police will give the referral to the Safe Center immediately to the victim, and the victim can get out of the house that day, and we can come there and pick them up or meet the victim somewhere else, or even house them at a motel or hotel until we have their situation figured out. So those police partnerships are really vital to victim safety. Okay, so types of abuse, right? We heard about them before, just very quickly to go through it. We know we have physical abuse, right? I think that's the umbrella that society sees when we think of domestic violence, interpersonal violence. That's not the case, right? There's many different types of abuse, and some are equally harmful, meaning the scars of emotional abuse and coercion and sexual abuse last much longer sometimes than the scars of physical abuse. So coercion, right? It's all about coercion and manipulation. The abuser could threaten to commit suicide, right? If you leave me, I'll kill myself. I mean, I'm sure we've heard of people saying that, right? That's such an abusive thing to say, that you're putting your life in someone else's hands, right? That's really an abusive thing to say, that they're putting, it's a threat. Threaten to harm the children, harm the partner, harm the partner's family. We'll call the authorities, right? Many times if someone's undocumented, I'm going to call ICE on you if you go and do something, or I'm going to get your family deported, right? We've heard these things happen, and people are scared of it. Who wants to get their family deported, right? So they stay. That's why they stay. And once again, that's why I'm really adamant about not telling someone, well, just leave. Or, well, if I was in your shoes, I would do this. Well, you're not in their shoes. Let's not say that, right? Because that increases the stigma, increases the shame, and that puts the ownership back on the victim that it's their fault. It's all about them. No, it's the abuser is abusing them. It's the abuser's fault no matter what. No one should ever hit someone. No one should ever abuse someone, no matter how difficult someone is to deal with. Break up then, get a divorce then. But no matter what, no one ever deserves abuse. So, other coercion of victims to engage in illegal activity, forced prostitution that we've seen a lot or a decent amount lately, to drop criminal charges. If you go and meet with the DA's office, you're never going to see $1. I'm going to take the kids. Say you made up the story. Don't show up in court to testify. Whatever it is, we've really heard it all. Sexual abuse, right? Another scary thing I've realized that not everyone understands that sexual abuse can happen in a marriage. That same example I gave to that classroom we were in 2019, same day, actually, another student was laughing because we were saying, if you're in a relationship, you're married, you can be raped. And this student, 16-year-old boy at the time, back in 2019, didn't understand that a wife can be raped or a husband can be raped. He said, what do you mean? If I'm married, I can have sex whenever I want. That's not the case, right? And this is going back to 2019, that we still have these issues to overcome, that just because you're married does not mean you own someone's body, right? Also, the other thing he was laughing at too is that men can be raped, right? We all know men can be raped, men can be victims of sexual abuse, but people still laugh at this. People still have that notion of, if I'm married, I own my spouse. It's still going on today, and we have a long way to go in the domestic violence field. We're making headway, but we still have a very, very long way to go. So, forced termination of a pregnancy, taping sexual acts, which is the revenge porn legislation, is a Class A misdemeanor if someone tapes a sexual act or takes a sexual picture and sends it out with intent to harm or intent to hurt. So that's now a Class A misdemeanor as of 2019, I believe it is. I think early 2019, that was on the law, at least in Nassau County. I think New York City may have done it before Nassau County. But and now across the board, it is a state law. I think some point in 2019 that changed. Accusations of infidelity, threats to disclose one's sexual orientation. I gave you the example earlier, as well as tampering with birth control. Putting a hole in a condom or misplacing or changing someone's birth control pills to force a pregnancy. We've heard that as well. Using children, right? Many times the abuser will use children as a leverage tool, right? Like, mommy hates you or daddy hates you, or we're fighting because of you, or make the child turn against the other parent and vice versa, right? We've seen that a lot too. And children are victims here as well, and children really know what's going on. They may not verbalize it as much, but that impact of that abuse really lasts for children too. Financial abuse as well. This is one, I think many in my experience, that people don't always understand this is a type of abuse as well, that if I'm married and I'm making $400,000 a year, my wife is making, or my husband is making $25,000 a year, it doesn't mean that we're one, right? We make our money, we pull it together. Of course, there needs to be limitations. Of course, we need to assign roles and budgets and things like that. But there's not really a forced allowance in a relationship, right? There's a difference of a budget and a forced allowance, right? So there's a big difference there. I just want to distinguish that. But, or if I'm once again making $400,000 a year, not allowing my spouse to have access to the family income, that we're one unit, we're married, right? And then that's a different story. On the job harassment, we've heard of abusers forcing individuals to quit their job, showing up at a job, making someone late to the job, sabotaging the car to get to the job, failing to pay child support. So financial abuse is very, very prevalent too. In my experience doing this work too, this is one of the more common types we see. Financial abuse is very, very common. Once again, it's not all physical. Emotional abuse, constant criticism, humiliation, telling someone they're not good enough, telling someone that you're so lucky to have me, who would want you, talking about someone's sexual history. You've been with X number of people, who would ever marry you, or who would ever want to be with you, right? Stalking, we talked about, harming family pets, which is very prevalent too. Many times our victims and survivors of abuse say they don't want to leave their abuser because they're afraid their dog, cat, whatever will be killed or hurt. We're lucky, once again, in Nassau County to have the partnership with the Nassau County SPCA, where they agree to take any animal in and hold the animal while the victim goes to our safe home, right? So whether it's a horse, cat, dog, snake, the SPCA will house the animal for however long they need, whether it's 1 month, 3 months, 9 months, whatever it is. The SPCA is there to make sure that pet is safe, to make sure the abuser can't access it, and also make sure the victim can get the help they need. So if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, and one of the barriers to getting help is they're afraid the pet may be harmed, we've found ways to overcome that. So just please reach out to our hotline if you need it. Once again, talk about that. So another myth too here is that alcohol causes abuse. Earlier on in my career, I was a substance abuse counselor, and many of my clients just so happened that they were also abusive too. And they always blamed the abuse on the alcohol time and time again. And very, very early on when I was an intern, I always remember that the person, I was shadowing someone and learning how everything goes. And the counselor next to me, there was a young adolescent teenager. He was maybe 17 years old. And he was saying, I only beat my girlfriend when I'm high or drunk. And then the counselor responds to him, would you have sex with your dog when you're drunk? And he got mad and started yelling. He's like, well, I would never do that. That's disgusting. And the counselor goes, well, if you know enough not to engage in a sexual act with the animal when you're drunk, you know enough not to hit your partner when you're drunk. Right. So that's always stuck in my head, where like, no matter how intoxicated someone is, we still know right from wrong, right? Our inhibitions may be lowered, but we still know there's certain things that we don't do no matter what, like sexual relations with an animal, right? That's just off limits. Intimate partner abuse should also be off limits. It should be in that same category as disgusting, as taboo as those sexual relations with an animal would be, right? But for some reason in society, it's perceived as differently. So that's one thing. I just want to share that story that always stood out to me regarding the role of alcohol in an abusive relationship and how alcohol perpetuates abuse. Not to say though, if someone is abusive and they have abusive tendencies, you add alcohol to their mental functioning for the moment, they may act out more, right? But you take someone that is not an abusive person, you get them obliterated with alcohol or drugs or whatever, they're not just going to start hitting people. They're not just going to become abusive. It's only if they have a tendency already. I was drunk, me, that's not me. Many common things are, I get angry when I'm drunk. Why do you annoy me when I'm drunk? I get like that when I'm high. Why do you have to, push my buttons when I'm high? Things like that we see all the time. And once again, the fault is not on the victim. The fault is on the abuser. It's on the abusive behavior. So barriers to leaving an abusive relationship, I wanted to talk about that too, that it really kind of bothers me when someone says those things like, why don't you just leave? Or you should do this, or you're dumb for staying with him or her. We've all heard it, many things like that. There are so many reasons why people don't leave. And one of them is the stigma, right? The stigma that it's the embarrassment of like, I put up with this abuse for 5 years, or I married this person of my dreams and I took a vow in front of the God of my understanding. And now I want to get divorced, or now this person's beating me, or whatever it is, right? Because many times abusers seem like the best guy or girl in the world. Best guy or girl ever, right? So people won't understand that. People say, "Oh, he's such a great person. She's such a great person. How is she or he hitting you?" Right? Well, they are, right? People don't always show their real side to everyone, of course, right? So economic constraints, fear of increased violence, concern for the children, lack of resources in the community, social pressures, cultural pressures of never getting divorced no matter what. We had a client, really great, amazing person. He was a gay man, and he married. He was with his partner for years and years and years, and his partner was getting more and more abusive. And he was with his partner before it was legal to marry a same-sex couple in New York State. So they got married in Vermont, but of course that wasn't legitimate in New York. And then they went to a ceremony in New York, and it was finally legal, and all these things. So his partner got abusive right around the same time, and we were talking, and he said, I never left because I took a vow in front of God that I would never harm my partner. I would never break this oath. On top of that, how would that look in the gay community that I'm proving that gay men should not be married? That's what it meant to him. That's what it meant to him, right? That's such a powerful statement to me that he was so proud that he can marry whoever he wants, and he was willing to deal with that abuse for a number of years, just not to make his community look bad, right? Or just his faith in God was so strong that no matter what the abuse was, he was not going to leave. So, and this was a man, he had an LCSW, actually. He was a really intelligent guy and well-versed in all different aspects of trauma, but in his own world, he couldn't leave for many, many years. So that's really how powerful this stuff is. It's way more than just, I would leave.
Pardon, Keith, we're running into the other presenter's time.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay, yes. Thank you. So that's it. I'm going to end here. And any questions, happy to answer them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. That was it is so important. Just and I do want to acknowledge that for all the attendees, we will be past our time, but everything Keith was talking about is extremely important. That's why, you know, like, we'll let it be, and I'm sure the people will be interested. If you do have to go, we understand. This is being recorded and it will be posted on our website. But if you can stay, I would encourage you to, because our next presenter, who Victoria will introduce, he has presented in for our members before, and it's what he has to say extremely valuable as well. So Victoria, go ahead, and I'll share my screen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith.
Our next presenter is Sergeant Joseph Alohan. Within his 16 years in the New York City Police Department, Sergeant Joseph Alohan has an extensive background, which includes investigations within the New York City Mass Transit System, Organized Crime Patrol Bureau as a detective investigator. Upon his promotion, he became a sergeant patrol supervisor within Brooklyn South 70 precinct and later Staten Island 120 precinct. And wanting to assist in a more impactful way, he was reassigned to run the domestic violence unit in Staten Island. He later joined the Domestic Violence Investigations Unit, investigating police officers on their response to distressed households, conducted citywide audits, and trained new domestic violence prevention officers. He uses a trauma-based approach as the liaison for the child trauma response team, and he also embraces the enhanced multidisciplinary team liaison position. And currently, Sergeant Alohan runs the NYPD Domestic Violence Training Program, bringing awareness to both victims, offenders, and enhancing patrol response and fostering a better understanding of how the NYPD can assist all families. Welcome, Sergeant. These are some resources that he has provided. And these will be on our website.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you, Cecilia. Keith, thank you for that very robust training as well. That was awesome. Alpana, awesome training as well. I want to thank the audience for sticking with us today. And thank you for tuning in and getting this very important information. I think everybody has a lot of great information that they've provided. Hopefully I can help provide a little bit more as it relates to the law enforcement aspect of things. A lot of things that were already discussed, I don't want to piggyback off of. So if something comes on and I skip past it due to time issues, as well as the fact that it was already discussed in length, I'm not going to bore you so much with that aspect of the training. So let me just share my screen. There we go. So just so you my apologies, hold on a second. Just seem to be having technical difficulties here. My apologies. Just so you know, my commanding officer of the domestic violence unit is Inspector Hawk. He oversees the domestic violence unit citywide. Citywide, we have 77 precincts, as well as 9 police service areas. Police service areas essentially patrol the housing, NYCHA buildings within the city confines, 5 boroughs. The domestic violence mission, our mission statement is to develop, establish, and implement protocols that enhance police response and handling of domestic incidents. Our goal is to reduce the number of domestic violence homicides, domestic violence incidents, and keeping families safe. We do this through a various assortment of ways, many of which has to do with collaborative efforts. And that's the new push in which Inspector Hawk is trying to push out there throughout the city. It was discussed before in regards to what intimate partner violence is. I just wanted to let people know in regards to the Family Court Act, what is considered domestic violence. Essentially married, a household, individuals who are married, formally married, related by marriage, related by blood, child in common, or intimate relationship or former intimate relationship. The nature of the relationship, regardless of whether the relationship is sexual in nature, frequency of interactions between the person, or duration of the relationship, whether married or not. NYPD has an expanded definition, which includes living together in a family type relationship, not married, formally live together in a family type relationship, not married, same-sex couples, and registered domestic partners. When you go to different states, Colorado being one of them, I had the privilege of training some of their officers when they came down here a few years back. They've seen an uptake in their domestic violence homicides. And one of the questions that I asked them, I said, how do you identify your domestic violence households? What do you define domestic violence as in your state? And he said, essentially, two married people, period. There's a lot of communication and mis-outreach opportunities to those families with distress, not just between the intimate partners, but between various household members, especially in this day and age when, as some of the earliest panelists alluded to in regards to the economic challenges people have nowadays. You have a blended family, mixed families, generational families that have economic issues all residing under the same household. And we can't just count some of their issues going on within a household. So Keith did a great job in breaking down some of the laws. One of the things that I want to highlight on family offenses, obviously you have menacing, assault, grand larceny, disorderly conduct, criminal mischief, breaking items within one's home, reckless endangerment. Three things I want to highlight are aggravated harassment, which is essentially annoyance, repeated text messages over some kind of social media text, social media platform, and it's repeated threats, repeated unwanted text messages, harassment, essentially a violation, and that tends to be somebody slaps another person, pushes someone, but there's no injury associated with this. Someone's following somebody unwantedly, and if those sound familiar, being that this is Stalking Awareness Month, I want to indicate that a lot of times people normally charge the aggravated harassment or the harassment, when in fact, if you can have your clients detail how often these incidents occurred, when they occurred, a lot of times you have stalking on your hand. And so it's very important that you try to be as detailed as possible when you're filing a report with a police officer, or just taking notes, keeping your own personal profile in a safety way, of course, but keep your own personal profile in regards to what's transpiring, what this offender might be doing to you. Some of the important ones to mention again, we have sexual misconduct, forcible touching, sex abuse, criminal obstruction of breathing. Essentially, you're trying to prevent someone from dialing 911, putting your hands over their mouth, from screaming, from yelling, blocking their breathing, things towards that nature. Strangulation, causing some kind of pressure, putting your hands around somebody's throat and causing and squeezing down, causing pressure, injuries, pain to one's neck. That's considered, strangulation is a felony. Identity theft, we see this commonly within our elder community, where their social security is being taken, their checks are being taken, and the offender is essentially passing their signature off as their own in order to obtain their finances. Coercion, we tend to run into a lot in law enforcement, where after an arrest is made, someone's having a third party family member contact the victim and indicate, if you press charges, I'm going to do this, I'm going to harm you if you move forward with these charges. That is witness intimidation as well as coercion on various levels. it was already mentioned in regards to the unlawful dissemination or publication of an intimate image. And it is against the law to share someone's intimate photo of them with another person if it was only explicit for your eyes only. We see this a lot where many, especially in our teen population in high schools, where someone during times of lust and love, they sent an X-rated photo of themselves to their partner. And when things turn sour and they want to leave their partner, you tend to see the partner threaten to send these photos out if the person leaves them. The mere threat, you have a violation of the unlawful disclosure of an intimate image, which is the New York City Administrative Code. If they in fact send it out, then you have the violation of the unlawful dissemination or publication of an intimate image. You know, contrary to popular beliefs, officers do not make arrests in all situations in which they respond to somebody's household. A lot of times we're there to be mediators, we're there to be referees, and sometimes many times people call us there for such reasons. But what I do like to highlight is the mandatory arrest aspects of law enforcement. You know, when we have probable cause to believe that the following has been committed: a felony. If someone committed a felony against you, we can't just walk away from that. You know, if somebody in a felony, it goes back to strangulation, puts their hands around your neck and choke you to the point where you went unconscious or you have physical injuries. You know, we're mandated to make that arrest. Violations of order of protections. You know, many times people use the order of protections, and that goes both ways, as some kind as a power tool. So, you know, a victim may sometimes call the offender during times of retribution to essentially say, come over, let's hang out, and, you know, weaponize that order of protection or weaponize police officers to essentially make an arrest saying that this person violated the order because they invited them over. One thing I tell you with order of protections is, you know, whether somebody invited you over or not, if the order stipulates that you're not supposed to be around that person, if it's a full stay away order, you're not supposed to be around that person whether they invited you to come or not. So I try to express that to individuals because we are mandated to make an arrest in situations such as that. And again, with the violations of orders of protections, they have to be intentionally. So people sometimes, if you're talking about our NYPD buildings, our housing police officers, you know, people may date each other in the same building. And if somebody lives on the 16th floor and they take the elevator down to the 10th floor, when the elevator opens and they see their ex-partner who happens to have an order of protection against the party on the 16th floor, they're not in violation at that moment. Reason being is there was no intent to seek out that person on the 10th floor. They just happened to take the elevator down because the staircase was too long to travel down itself. So that is, you know, there wouldn't be an arrest in that situation. If things escalate after the parties see each other, now, you know, we may talk about the violation based on the stipulations of that order of protection. Misdemeanors. Officers must arrest on misdemeanors as well. So you're talking about criminal obstruction of breathing, you know, a misdemeanor assault. Officers must make the arrest. Now, you have on this slide that says with exceptions, there are times where we are allowed to use discretion as it relates to misdemeanors, and officers are not allowed to coerce the victim to say, you don't want to arrest this person. We don't ask victims if they want the person arrested. If we see that we have probable cause to make an arrest, we make the arrest. And if the victim propels us and says, listen, you know, I really don't want the mother of my child arrested. This is the first time that she's done this to me. Please, please, please. Officers are allowed to make to use discretion in those misdemeanor situations. You know, but depending on the severity of the violence and what's going on in the household. So just for your information on that. Violations, if somebody walks across an officer while they're talking and interviewing parties and slaps them in the face in the officer's presence, though the person who was slapped, though they may say that they have no injuries, they have no, you know, it's okay, don't worry about it. I say that person has gall. For to walk across and slap your partner in the face in front of police officers, what are you doing behind closed doors when there's no type of authority around to prevent this harm? So an arrest is mandated when we see a violation in our presence in the situations that I just mentioned. So NYPD response to family households. How do victims reach out to us and let us know that they're going through some kind of trauma or harm? So you can call 911. As of July this year of 2020, text to 911 was fully operational within the 5 boroughs, NYPD, you know, New York City five boroughs. You can also walk into any precinct. You know, it is falsehood if somebody tells you that, oh, you have to go to your precinct of concern, your resident precinct, in order to make a report. That is not the truth. You can go into any one of the 77 precincts, any one of the 9 police service areas, and you can also go into any transit police hub and file a report. Police officers are mandated to take the report and refer the report. We do not refer the complainant, just so you're aware of that. So what happens when officers respond to these 911 calls? They tactically respond. So what does that tactic response look like? Depending on the type of call, it may have various units respond. You know, if the person says this person just stabbed me, or this person has a knife, or they have a firearm, yes, it's not going to just be one lonesome police officer responding to the scene. It's going to be a plethora of different units responding to protect and safeguard this victim. You know, if it's a text to 911, tactically, we're not going to call back that victim. Central 911 is already trained. Our domestic violence officers, our police officers responding to these jobs are trained not to call that number because the person texted for a reason. They're possibly in the vicinity of the offender and not able to pick up the phone and talk what's going on to them. Just to be aware of that. We try to safely control and respectfully control the scene. Listen, police work is not always pretty, and it's not always, you know, the people who are offenders, we're talking about power and control. People who have an issue with giving up that power and control, wanting to maintain that over their intimate partner or a loved one. They're not going to listen to police officers in many instances. So a lot of times it tends to turn from something where it could have just been a talk to physical, because that power and control is now being seized from that individual. We try to separate parties to get the full story. And one of the things I like to discuss as well is in regards to the limited English proficient LEP individuals, people who are limited English proficient. You know, so officers are equipped with department phones that have access to language line. There's a domestic violence language line as well as a regular language line. So people who do not speak English or cannot, they are deaf or hard of hearing, we have also a sign language line on the phones that can interpret as well as help translate for officers in real time, so that the victim can truly get their story out. Just wanted to make note of that. You know, we take notes of what transpired. When we walk to a scene and we see what's going on, we make note of that. All of that is could be prosecuted and help push forward a case. We try to determine who the primary physical aggressor is. This can be very hard in many situations, but most times we get it right. We allow parties to write their own stories on a report. Officers give victims a domestic incident report, and you know, victims are allowed to write in their own volition, in their own language, on the second page of the domestic incident report what transpired. We collect evidence. You know, if there's a bloody knife on the floor, if there's damage to people's homes, living room, broken glass, we take photos of this. Officers are equipped with body-worn cameras, not only for their safety, but also for the integrity of what transpired at these scenes, as well as what people may say officers done, and vice versa. What happens, and as again, if any of those must arrest situations occurs, then an officer makes an arrest. As it relates to what happens after a report is taken, those reports are forwarded to the domestic violence unit, the district attorney's office, and or appropriate investigative units for those cases that deem such. Domestic violence unit do follow-up home visits in those cases that require, based on the lethality of the crime or what the domestic incident report alleged. This is how the domestic incident report looks. You know, on this report, again, this is not a report that was made by the New York City Police Department. This is a report that was, you know, convened by way more scholarly people than I am, and essentially academics, people who are from advocacy backgrounds, victim backgrounds, and essentially they came up with this report, which kind of gave a good full plate of what could be asked to individuals experiencing some level of stress in their household. On this report, you have certain things to, you know, does this person have access to firearms? does this person abuse alcohol or drugs? Has this person threatened to harm you or your child? Have they harmed your animals? A lot of people disregard animals when you walk to a domestic scene, but what we train our officers on is to also pay attention to these scenes that have, maybe a dog that may be limping, a cat that may be half burnt. Ask these probing questions in regards to what happened to this animal. And we might have other charges as relates to ASPCA, bringing them into the mix on things. Again, NYPD domestic violence, we handled 267,295 domestic incident reports last year. You're talking about 239,290 radio runs versus 28,005 walk-ins to a precinct. Typically, people walk into a precinct. Why? Because they did it during a time when they can escape the offender at home. They don't want their neighbors in their business. And a lot of times they don't want to be labeled, that they're talking to police officers in their neighborhood based on, certain stigmas. You're talking about an average of 732 reports per day on average that domestic violence deal with. In COVID-19 2020, domestic violence calls were down approximately -4%. Now, though the 911 calls were down, I will tell you that, we've heard from various community-based organizations which indicated that their call lines have blown up during this time. So I know for a fact that things are happening behind people's closed doors. A lot of times they don't want to get the criminal justice system involved in their family and with their loved ones. And I understand it, I get it. But I just wanted to impart those stats for you. Domestic violence crimes fell overall 7.6% in 2020. Citywide overall crime fell 0.7%. Citywide murders were up 46.7%. So you're talking about 468 in 2020 versus 319 in 2019. A lot of these were attributed to our gang. We're doing a big push in regards to gang violence because what somebody's doing in the street doesn't stop in the street. I believe it's happening behind closed doors as well. We just have to do better outreach in regards to getting people to speak up and hopefully work with these violence reducers in offender-based organizations to try to reduce the crimes and the harm that's happening in our streets. Domestic violence homicides were down 10.9%. So you're talking about 57 in 2020 versus 64 in 2019. So we're talking about the breakdown within females. Females of overall domestic violence crimes, you're talking about 28 compared to 29 victims for the overall 57. Of IPV victims, 18 of which were female, and IPV male victims, 10 were victims of homicide, domestic violence homicide. Again, as we break down elderly and children, so out of those 57 domestic violence homicides, 10 of which were elderly, 9 of which were children. So I want you to look at the big number up top. 267,000 domestic incident radio runs. Family arrests. New York City Police Department made 39,786 arrests related to DV family arrests. That's a staggering number compared to what the overall call is. That's just to let you know that police officers are not just arresting families. Again, we spoke about the mandated arrest and why police officers have to make the arrest. So if those fell into those guidelines, out of that 276,000 domestic radio runs, I'd say that's a good, healthy number as it relates to officers getting it right. So again, 57 domestic violence homicides in 2020. Of those, 69.2% never made a police report. You're talking about 39 out of 57 never filed a police report. We never had any interaction with this family before. That's why I stress the importance to work with community-based organizations and community-based organizations. I stress them to also try to work with law enforcement and the DA's office to try to get a comprehensive plan together to assist victims. Domestic violence officers, what do we do? Perform home visits. I briefly explained what home visits were entailed. It's a tactical visit to a home. We don't call and make appointments for home visits. We tend to pop up unannounced to homes to catch the offender being honest. you know, what's going on in this household. We check up with the family to provide services and resources to them. We work with detectives on open cases, evaluate risk assessments based on that lethalities of what's going on in the domestic incident report indicates what type of lethality is going on in this household. Domestic violence officers are all equipped with a phone. Most of their victims have their direct line to contact them. Obviously, officers aren't working 24 hours a day, those particular officers. So we tell them, you know, in times of emergency, call 911, but when you know the hours in which I'm typically working, text me, let me know what's going on, and I can, you know, respond and try to get the best response possible to you. You know, we maintain a high propensity list. You know, these are homes that experience a significant level of trauma consistently related to domestic violence and IPV violence. We collaborate with Safe Horizons, Community DV Partners, ACS, Department of Aging, District Attorney's Office, effect arrests, conduct warrant checks, serve and enforce orders of protections, citywide outreaches. Domestic violence prevention officers. So you're talking about the oversight, One Police Plaza, which is in the picture in the background. Again, I told you, Inspector Hawk, you know, we have CompStat meetings. And typically you have the chief of patrol, Terrence Monahan, as well as all the big heads, the executive officers of the police department, and we audit precincts citywide in regards to their overall crime and how they're handling it. We audit those officers, those executives in their precincts and how they're running their domestic violence programs. And these are typically done at DOMSTAT meetings, where we see what's happening with patrol spots, outreaches, collaborations, what agencies are people collaborating with? Why are we having to go to the same home over and over? Have we tried to get any of a community-based organization involved? Domestic Violence Investigations Unit. This is a unit I used to work in where we monitor. It's a quality control analysis of the NYPD's domestic violence unit. You know, what I used to do was essentially investigate police officers and how they're responding to domestic violence. I used to re-interview victims after these patrol officers responded, and I used to monitor those officers who may have a record of not being the most polite to families, and deal with them as appropriate when needed. Domestic violence investigations is also responsible for investigating U visas. So, you know, Mr. Keefe brought up what U visas were before, but just to give those a little bit more in depth about it, the federal U non-immigration status visa program offer temporary immigration protections for victims of serious crimes who meet certain requirements. To qualify for either program, victims must show that they have assisted law enforcement investigations or prosecution related to a serious crime. This is known as the helpfulness requirement. The NYPD does not submit these forms on behalf of the victims. Victims are responsible for submitting all forms and requests of immigration status directly to the federal government, specifically to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, just for your information on that. FJCs, they are currently closed due to COVID. I think Manhattan's the only borough that's open right now. They're looking into doing some kind of flex open hours soon. But currently we still do have DVPOs who are liaisoning with them to make sure that you know, all bases are covered and any services needed can be had. Enhanced multiple disciplinary team. Again, this is a collaboration between Cornell, NYPD, District Attorney's Office. This various organizations, APS, HRA, sit at this table, a District Attorney's Elder Abuse Unit, and we basically case plan. You know, everything's made confidential, but you have skilled professionals for each background, essentially giving their input on how a case should be moved forward and how each organization could potentially help a family or a victim of elder abuse. One thing I try to always provide is the helpline for concerned persons. Anybody who sees an elderly person, and elderly is qualified somebody who is 60 and above, if you see your neighbor or friend, or you know a family member who may be in need for help, helpline for concerned persons, that's the number there, 212-746-6905, as well as APS referral services for those organizations that are dealing directly with their victims. You can call the APS referral service line. We also have a child trauma response. These are in 11 precincts. And this is a program by Safe Horizons, partnered with the District Attorney's Office as well as NYPD. This is to help reduce the trauma of children and their risk developing PTSD. You know, there's studies that show children who experience a high level of domestic violence in their household are severely impacted by it later on in life as they move forward. These are the precincts that are currently enrolled in it: 2334, the 40, 44, 46, 52, 102, 103, 114, 115, PSA 5. Some resources for the public that I want to make people aware of. Obviously, if there's an emergency, you call or text 911. You have the Precinct Crime Victims Advocate Program, which is in every single precinct. Currently, they are physically not in the precincts due to COVID restrictions and the policies governing their agency, but they are still making phone calls and doing outreaches to victims. You have the New York State Information, 311. You have New York City DV Hotline, New York City Family Justice Center, National Teen Dating Abuse Line, APS, ASPCA, ACS, and Domestic Violence Investigations Unit as it relates to U visa questions. Anybody has any questions with U visas, you can contact the Domestic Violence Investigations Unit, or you can go directly onto www.uscis.gov to get ascertain questions there. As what was provided earlier by Victoria, you have some resources that relates to Domestic Violence Unit and resources. And that first one, Domestic Violence Resources, when you look at that website, it also provides you with all the police precincts as well in their phone numbers in case you as an advocate, you're trying to speak on behalf of your client. The next bullet, you have summary of New York State domestic violence and related laws by subject, beginning from 1995 to current. You also have EMDT, Enhanced Multiple Disciplinary Teams info and resources if you wanted to know more about that. As well as the CTRT, Child Trauma Response Teams. Info and resources are on there as well. That concludes my presentation. It's been a pleasure. This is actually the last day that I will be in the Domestic Violence Unit. I was transferred. I've been doing domestic violence for quite some time. I will now be moving into the Police Impersonations Unit, which deals with a lot of scams, people impersonating police officers, and targeted immigration communities, and so on and so forth. So I look forward to that new assignment, but my heart will always remain in domestic violence. People are always urged to still contact me if need be, and I can always refer you to the right sources if need be. Victorious, I want to thank you very much for inviting me, and to everyone who's in attendance, the panelists, and to the group, I just want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sergeant. So Cecilia, we'll start with our first question in our chat.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. First, thank you, Alpana, Keith, and Sergeant Alohan. I had many questions, but you responded them all. And I will start with the first question we have on the chat, which is, what kind of services or assistance can NYS Special Victim Office provide? Is there any time limitation for the Special Victim Office to provide services or assistance?
So the New York City Office of Victim Services provides a variety of different services to the general public as well as providers. They have technical assistance programs. They also have programs for funding programs like ours. We are funded by the Office of Victim Services, and it funds many of our positions where we are able to provide all of our services for free, as well as pays the hospitals that have, when they conduct a forensic rape evidence collection kit, for example, they also provide reimbursement for that. So not so much as like direct services, but they have, you can, when you file compensation for application as a victim of crime, they help you with that process, as well as help you gather, connect you to advocates that can, in your community, local community, that can help you gather all the information to file the claim. And in terms of limitation, they do say within a year of crime, but we've helped survivors file claims where it's been in the past, but because they weren't aware of the program, did not file it, and we're able, we do get those approved as well if they want to file a claim. So summary of it, but if you look at their website, they have a lot of information.
Thank you, Alpana. And There's a question about Safe Center's legal services. Can a New York City resident take advantage of those services?
The Safe Center is for Nassau County residents. I reach out to Safe Horizons, I believe, but the Safe Center, our clientele are not primary Nassau County residents, but they could always call the hotline and ask for a referral. The hotline may know of other resources in the New York City area as well.
Thank you for that.
I would add that if you do need legal support, just write to us, and we do have a legal team. If we could not help you with your inquiry, we will refer you in the right direction. So please feel free to contact us. Maria, is there any other question? Thank you for this interesting presentation. Have the legal services from the Safe Center been affected by the court closures, reduced access to court, profiling new cases, and the backlogged court calendars? How has this affected the people you serve? Nassau County courts maybe haven't been as severely affected as the courts in New York City. In New York City, restrictions on new case filings, custody and visitation, not orders of restitution, have been painful.
Yeah, so a lot of the examples I gave, once again, were prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been severely impacted. Courts took a while to open up. So I think the same struggles in New York City are going on in the Nassau County court system, where everything is significantly delayed.
Thank you. And I would like for us, Surgeon Alohan, to emphasize it, because what I hear from you is like people are together, the abuser, the victim in the same household, and we have experienced our own like phone calls when the victim cannot speak up. So if you can just like repeat that, people can text, and also Keith and Alpana, what a person that's stuck with an abuser do if they need help.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So one thing I always tell people, I teach to my kids, to friends and family, as well as outside. The time to crisis plan is before the crisis. So essentially, what friends can you identify who are safe, who might be able to be provided with safe targeted words, or code words to know that, oh, wait a minute, I'm a vegetarian, but if I call them and say, you know what, could you please go and buy me a hamburger, that may mean, okay, I'm in risk right now, I'm in harm. So, providing neighbors with a cold knock or something towards that nature. If you live in NYCHA housing and sometimes, you may need help, or you need them to call 911 during an extreme traumatic incident time, you might want to knock on a wall or do certain things so that they are aware that, okay, this is time to call 911. And again, texting is one way of doing it, but I also tell people to be mindful of deleting that text afterwards so that the offender doesn't grab their phone and look at it. These are things that could be beneficial. Also having a third party, call on their behalf and let them know, okay, this is the apartment, this is the thing. She typically told me anytime she just sends me a period or something, a fist or a certain emoji, this means to call 911. These are things that I typically tell people to safely plan on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And there's one more question. It says, what kind of funding program can Special Victim Office provide? Can you please identify it a little bit more? Thank you.
So Office of Victim Services funds a lot of programs that provide services to domestic violence survivors, sexual assault survivors, elder abuse survivors, child abuse survivors, as well as to hospitals that conduct evidence collection in the aftermath of sexual assault. I've put their website on my resources. If you go to that, you can see what are the different programs that they fund and information how to apply for those as well.
Thank you, Alpana. And Surgeon, show the slides again with phone numbers before those links. Almost end of the presentation. How to apply those funding. So the slides and the recording of this presentation will be up on our website. Victoria, what do you think? In the interest of time, if that's okay.
So we want to thank everyone who attended. We thank you for staying past the time, but we know we were all learning valuable information. And again, we thank our 3 esteemed panelists for giving their time, for doing the research and putting together the information in such a digestible form. And we have all learned much from all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. And again, thank you for attending. We will be sending a survey. Please feel free to contact us if you need any help. We can put you in touch with the right help and support. Thank you, Keith, Alpana, and Sergeant for joining us tonight. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.